The Find Your True North podcast and blog are dedicated to exploring intuition and how we use it in our businesses and lives. Together, we'll learn how to sharpen our intuition to make our daily decision-making easier. We'll find out how to hear the language of intuition, and we'll learn how to remove the emotional, mental, and physical barriers we might have to hearing it. Today, we'll be talking with Vanessa Petronelli. Vanessa is an intuitive success coach who works with high-performing female entrepreneurs, providing them with business and spiritual mentoring. In this episode, Vanessa and I will be talking about how she helps her clients tap into their own intuition, what it takes to be a clearer vessel for intuition, how human design helps you understand your own gifts and choose your direction, and the dance between being and doing, as well as the difficulty and beauty in trusting intuition when times get rough. For more information about the Find Your True North podcast, visit www.intuition.today. And now, enjoy the episode. So what's your personal definition of intuition? I've heard a couple of different things in there, but I'm wondering how you personally define it.
Yeah. I've answered this before, and I want to give you an answer that I feel is most aligned with who I am now. I believe intuition is the guidance that we receive from a version or aspect of ourselves, whether you call that God, your soul, higher self, the I am presence, Jesus, whatever it is that is fully aligned and in complete awareness of your path and your journey in life. And it is in constant communication with us, this aspect of us. It is like this higher knowing, this higher informational part of us that has this connection to who we really are, back to source, back to God. And how it is, interpreted, the information is different for everyone, but typically it moves through us through our body. Through our mind. Our mind is the data collector and helps us to process the information. Mm-hmm. And then our body also helps us to viscerally experience what that is. So for some people, they're gone in the wrong direction. They kind of know, they feel a tightness or a contraction in their body. Or, when we've met somebody that we really vibe with, right? There's just this feeling of love and relaxation and deep connection. I mean, it can be so subtle, and it can be so open and on fire for people. And, intuition typically, for me has been defined through seeing, which is like an internal seeing, like through the mind's eye seeing, through, hearing. So clairaudience, clairvoyance, claircognizance, like clear knowing, and clairsentience, which is this clear feeling. And it's just this version or this aspect of ourselves that is coming from this higher place, helping to transmit this information so that we can make an informed decision around our direction and where we're going. The thing that gets in the way typically is the limited mind, or the fear-based. I don't really like to refer to it as the ego as much, because there's just so much judgment and negativity around the ego, but we need it for this experience. But it's the unhealthy ego, or the unhealthy part of our mind, that is very rooted in fear, that is very disconnected from our body, from our experience, from who we are. And I think the stronger and more connected we come to ourselves, the more intuitive we become, and the more disconnected we are from our true self and from our full whole being, the less connected we are to that part of ourselves that's relaying information consistently. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I'm hearing your experience includes seeing, hearing, and also feeling.
Yeah, feeling and just knowing something.
Knowing. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And Go ahead.
You continue.
I was just going to say, and it sometimes comes in as all four, sometimes it's one or the other. It might not be all at the same time.
Do you notice patterns in how they show up? For example, here, I'll give you an example for me. Seeing, for me, I see pictures occasionally, but it's really rare. Mm-hmm. And it's usually, and if I'm seeing and hearing something together, hearing is even rarer, like actually hearing the words. It's usually something pretty big and maybe more out there. And what I mean by out there is like we all have feelings in a person-to-person situation, like most of us can identify that. That's not really out there. What I mean by out there is more like something that'd be extremely hard to explain to the person in front of you because they'd wonder how you know that kind of thing.
Right.
Do you notice any kind of pattern for yourself?
Totally. I started to really notice that with clients. So I will receive information. I can give you a great example. Recently, I was at a store, and this is one of those weird experiences, and it doesn't happen all the time, but it was kind of like a Teresa Caputo moment. The Medium on TLC. Mm-hmm. I kept getting information about these girls that were at the front desk area, and it just was repeated for me. It was like I felt the presence of a being. I felt the presence of somebody trying to relay information to me. I could hear, feel, see. I was like, okay, I just want to do my thing. If this is really important, whatever it is that you want to tell me, I'll do it on my way out. And the feeling was so overwhelming that I had to stop and talk to these two women. And what was coming up was a deceased grandmother had come through. And I don't call myself a medium, but I have had many experiences over the years of that. And there was all this information that I was being told about one of these women. They were sisters. It turned out they were sisters because I was being shown this connection between them and with this woman talking to me. But I wasn't sure what it was, but the focus was on one of them in particular. And well, it turns out, she was going through a very difficult time in making decisions in her life. In her love life and in her professional life. And I was getting just all this stream of, consciousness, this information for her. I mean, they were in tears. They're like, how do you know this? I'm like, I just, this happens, and how it happens, I'm just an open channel and vessel for this to happen. And clearly your deceased grandmother had this information to share with you. And it was very specific for her, what she needed to know. So yeah, there are those out there experiences, and they typically come, I won't be sitting here and tuning into you right now. Let's say I'm not getting all this intuitive information about you because we're having this conversation. It's just, it's not available in this moment, but I'm sure if there was something that needed to be said, or we were in this context of, can you help me? Or, I'm going through this, then the information and data would start to come through for me. So there is a pattern. Typically, when somebody is coming to me who is very open to receiving assistance and support, who are a yes to my sharing, to, I would say, me giving them my gifts in that moment, giving them some sort of support or assistance, absolutely. So a client, the women in my program, they're a yes. Every now and then there is an odd circumstance where it's very random. And no, they're not asking me for help, that information comes through. And then there's just the smaller pieces, you walk into a room and you're like, this doesn't feel aligned for me to be here. Decisions, same thing. That seems to be a much more visceral experience for me. When I'm choosing people who come into I call it my team of support, who are helping me, with my business, with my success, with myself, I'm very selective about who comes in. I can feel of energy. I can feel a vibration. I can feel the energy of money. When I know when money is coming, I get an itchy right palm. Very strange things will come that may not be universal for everyone. And that's the thing. I don't think that intuition is maybe some doctors and scientists might tell you that it's a something happens in the brain or something like that. I've read all kinds of biological and physiological things around intuition. But for me, there's just still, even after all these years of having this experience with intuition and with God and with just my spirituality, is so mysterious to me. There's just something I feel that's so sacred in our own individual experiences with our intuition. And what I love to help people with, typically my women, is helping them to discover what their flavor of their intuition is for them. Me not saying, well, this is how it should be, because that's my experience. It's well, no, your intuition is going to be so sacred and so different than maybe mine will. There could be similarities to it, but how the information comes through is going to be so unique to you because you're a unique individual.
So how to maybe speak into that a little bit more? How do you help them find the flavor of their intuition? Because I think that's a major part of understanding intuition is first knowing that yours is not going to be the same as the next person. There's no universal definition. But also, how do you even figure out what the language of your intuition?
Right. Well, I'm going to just preface this by saying it takes a lot of years of development. Okay. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that you're going to wake up tomorrow. Maybe for some people it might be, I woke up kind of like how it happened with me. I woke up and I was like all of a sudden, exploding with gifts. But I know now that I look back, it was happening over time in bits and pieces. I don't believe that everyone is going to be maybe using their intuition to guide and support people, but I do believe that we're all intuitive. And some people are going to be much more intuitive than others will. But it doesn't mean that that person who's not as intuitive as like a psychic or a healer, let's say, doesn't mean that they're not intuitive. It just, the way their intuition moves through them is different. The first thing I would say is just really, I find, because I used to run workshops on this, I think the most important thing is developing yourself and knowing who you are. I really believe that embarking on a journey, like saying yes to personal development, like who am I? What am I here to do? Let me work through a lot of the past experiences that have basically cluttered and clouded my whole being and my energy. Let me work on what it means, what my spirituality means to me, what energy means to me, because these are all factors. Because to have a clear vessel and to become a clearer channel of being tapped into your intuition, your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and energetic parts of you, they need to be worked on. So it's not just, I need to get rid of limiting beliefs in my head and now I'm intuitive, or I need to get tapped into my body more. It's a culmination of everything. It's a holistic, I would say, discovery of your intuitive abilities. So I usually recommend for people, like, start to get to know yourself. Start to work and develop yourself. Start to think outside of the box a little bit more. If you're closed down to receiving extrasensory perceptive information, and you're like, no, I'm too scared about that, or I'm not open to that, or that's all hogwash, then yeah, you're probably going to be more closed. Maybe it might be more of a visceral, physical response to your body. Get connected. I start to help my women really work on themselves and work on their spirituality, helping them to really understand, like, what is it that I'm here to connect to? I usually start with the higher self, because that seems to be a much more widely accepted and, I would say, easier thing to tap into than, let's say, let's go to God, because people's understanding of God and their definition of God is very different. People have a lot of resistance and fear around it. I get that because I did for a long time. Or if you start to talk about angels or guides, and it's going to be like, oh, this is so new agey and hippy dippy, like, F that. I don't want to have anything that's not, that's not helpful. So the higher self for me tends to be one of the earlier stages that I will work on helping my clients and the women that come to me develop, to start really embodying that, to start getting connected to that. And for every person, it's different. So I'll take them through a series, it's my whole SAS program, my Soul Aligned Success Sisterhood. It takes them through that whole process of really learning how to tap in and connect to this part of themselves while here on earth developing who they are, getting connected to their heart and their soul's desires, cleaning up the energy field. Because believe it or not, our energetic field, or our astral body, our causal bodies, our subtle bodies of energy around us, our auric field, hold a lot of information and data that is not always necessarily helpful and can be very heavy energetically for us to be carrying around. And then I give them a series of self-care rituals and routines to be implementing every day that start to make your vessel ripened and ready to receive this information. And for every woman, it's a little different. In my last round, and even with clients, like, they'll come in and they'll be like, I've never really had this connection to this part of myself. And they'll start to connect, and then it's like, whoa, like, everything just starts to align and line up in their life in a way that never did before. So there is some techniques as well, very basic techniques. I've talked about this before, which is understanding how your body responds to things. So first of all, one of the most basic things I would tell people is you need to understand what, like, a full-bodied yes or a hell yes or a fuck yeah it feels like in your body. Like, the part of you that's like, yes, what does it feel like for you? What is it like? What do you notice happening neck down? And just having somebody get really clear on that so they can set up scenarios. They can partner up with somebody and that person can say to them, here are scenarios that you would typically be a hell yes to. I'm just going to randomly select what it might be. Notice what happens in your body. Let's record it and write it down. Then you also do the hell no. Full body, no, I'm not up for this. Know what that means. So like get examples where you know that you would be a hell no to that. Notice what happens in your body. And then also do something where you're like a maybe, which tends to be an area where people get a little stuck. In maybe land, I use also a stoplight example for this. Like there's the red, which is, hell no, stop, caution, like you're going down a bad alley and there's somebody waiting in there to attack you, to the yellow being like the warning sign, which also is not just a warning sign, but also, it's needing more information. You may need some more information. So that is like, I need to sit with this and just feel into what it is. I need to tap into, is this my fear that's governing this? Is there resistance here? Is it because I'm about to take a really big leap into the unknown and like my system is not like hell yes to that because there's some, fear there, worry there, panic there. And so that's usually like a sit and let's wait and like feel into or think about, or, I need to gather some more information, something as basic as that. And then there's the green light, which is that hell yes, that full bodied, like I'm expanding. I feel like so good. I feel relaxed. I feel like just this energy flowing through me. I feel safe. It's just a very visceral and palpable feeling and very clear what these are. So that's typically what I've taken, students in the past and clients through when they're very basic in this and they have like no knowledge about it. Just get clear on how your body responds first and start to get into the body.
Are you familiar with human design?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know it's so fascinating. So the generators. I think anyone who has a sacral oriented decision making. Yeah, authority. There we go. They're the ones who have the guttural reactions too, not just a body reaction, but a guttural reaction. And I never thought that I had this until my partner once said, do you realize when you get excited about something, you go, woo? And I was like, no, I don't. And then I think I did it the same day and I was like, oh my God, I do that. I just didn't think about it. And it's just funny that there's so many times that you actually do make a response, but you may not even be aware of it because you've been doing it for so long. So either it's ugh, or or the excited woo type of something. So I think it's also like, how do you find yourself talking about it? If you can't tap into the body right away, what do you find yourself speaking into? And what's the tone of voice or the guttural sounds you're making or the squeals of excitement that you're making?
Could even be a facial expression too. Exactly. Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. I'm a manifesting generator, so
me too.
I do have sacral authority. And for us, what's been so, if you don't know about human design, I would say just like go and do some research on it because it's absolutely so fascinating and life changing. It's changed so much even in my business because speaking of this piece around that, for a long time in my business, I'll relay something I haven't actually ever talked about publicly. I noticed this before when I would be in relationships, when I'd be dating. I would know how the relationship would end. I would know if the guy would be, would turn out to be the one that I would, date for a long time. I would know everything about it, like start to end. And it was pretty much 100% accurate every time. And then when I was in business, there's been a lot of self-discovery and exploration because, being an entrepreneur, let's just face it, it's like the greatest self-development and spiritual journey you could ever embark upon. And one of the things that was very fascinating for me is that I would often know before even getting into a sales conversation, like an enrollment call with somebody, if they're my client or not. And I would get very frustrated. It was something that was coming up for me a long time because I would, when I give a lot of myself even when I'm not working with somebody, like I'm getting onto a call, I like to spend my time talking to somebody and really knowing if like this is a fit, we're fit for each other to work together. I take it really seriously and I really honor somebody in their process. But I will know, looking at a Facebook photo, seeing somebody in a room, I couldn't look at an email, not even know who the person is, like an application, and be like, nope. Yep, that's my client. I've had telepathy with potential clients that I've not even talked to about coaching. And then they'll come to me and they'll be like, I've been thinking about you. We need to work together. I'm like, oh, wow, you've been coming up into my awareness a lot too. It's the strangest thing. And when I learned that that is how my body and how my system relays information to me, I started to actually relax more even in my business and my enrollment process, because now I didn't feel so bad. It was like, oh, this is the way I'm built. Mm-hmm. I am built knowing the answer and the outcome for these particular scenarios. So I'm actually going to use it to my benefit, not waste somebody's time, not waste my time, and just actually find a way to work with this energy, this information I'm getting in a way that's like honoring myself and them in the process. And I didn't wrong myself anymore. I didn't judge myself about it anymore, because without a doubt, I can tell you every single person that comes to work with me, it's intuitive now. It is intuitive selection to a T. And I will know, just like I did, when I was dating, who I'm meant to work with and who I'm not. It's so interesting and fascinating. So I'm glad you brought up the manifesting piece, the human design piece.
Another piece around that too is, I kind of struggled with this at first, especially in your business when you need to be forward thinking and you need to be moving ahead. But with the being asked piece and having things come to you in your experience rather than constantly pushing forward. And I've always identified myself as a floater versus a swimmer. So someone who just kind of, I've had some wonderful experiences and ended up in some amazing places with that, but at times it'd be nice to have a goal. So that piece kind of explained to me, this is why that works for you, because it comes into your experience and you are to respond to it. And it's been an interesting balance to find, like, how much am I pushing forward and how much am I allowing what is going to happen to just come up and to use it then.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's the thing, how I look at it too, is just how much am I being and how much am I doing?
Right.
Yeah.
That's
and it's
a very succinct way to say that.
No, I hear you. It's the same thing. It's just, it's like this dance between being and doing, and almost like, I see it almost like a figure eight, like an infinity sign. Like when we're too focused on doing, I think so many times we're so alone in the process, and we're actually working against intuition a lot. Mm-hmm. And the guidance that we're receiving internally, because I'll meet a lot of entrepreneurs and people in the world just in general are burnt out because that's all they're doing is doing, because we've been brought up in a society that basically conditions us that we should be doing all the time. Mm-hmm. Accomplishing, right? So the being piece, which is where most of the information has the space and the opportunity to land, we can hear it, we can feel it, we can express it and experience it, helps us to know when it's the right time to act or when it's just time to just like hang back and float. Like I love that idea of floating, because when you're floating, things will probably come and be drawn to you, right? But when you're swimming, there could be all kinds of things that you're going to miss that are out at sea, right? Just floating around because you're swimming away from it, right? Or you're the one that's like doing all the work trying to float toward it. Mm-hmm. I think our connection, Sarah, and how this interview even happened was very much both of us just drawing toward each other. Mm. It was so aligned and so synchronized. You put something out there. I was initially invited to it, right, through my partner, and here we are having this conversation. It wasn't like you were just going actively through a list of people saying, oh, I'm going to contact. Is this something that you know what I mean? Like you weren't doing all the swimming or the action. You did an aligned action by what you did, how we found each other in this process. And I've also put that beacon out of like, yeah, I love these opportunities to connect and interview and do these things. And And it was just like this, like two magnets coming together at the right time and in the right order and the right way.
That's a really good observation. When I started this project, it was I had people in mind that I knew I wanted to speak to, so it was reaching out. And at this point now, there's enough people that know about it or I've interviewed, and that now they're just kind of coming my way. And so it's interesting to see who shows up.
Yeah, you become a lighthouse.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's get into how you use intuition when you work with your clients. So when you're interacting with them, how do you use it in those situations?
It's such an interesting piece because, well, before I enter every session or when I'm doing my group facilitating, I'm always asking God in the highest wisdom to be presented, to come through me. So, I mean, I think I have to, it's not a technical thing so much as it is an alignment piece for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm very vibrationally precise and energetically precise with myself. So my start of my day is basically getting myself ready to be able to serve and to channel. And I do call it channeling. It doesn't always, the channeling will show up differently. It's not like I transform and I'm like, Esther Hicks channeling Abraham, right? It's not, that's not how it works through me, at least at this point. I can't say what will happen in the future, but I will get, so vibrationally precise with myself before going into a session and very connected to God and to my higher self. And then when I'm in a session, I always ask, like, take command of this, take over this session for me so that this person can receive exactly what they need in this session today to help them to become more aligned to God, to themselves, to the work that they're putting out in the world. Because all the people that I'm working with are up to really awesome things and they want to help more people. So when I'm in a session, typically what happens is I can often feel and see what's going on for them. My sessions are also very technical too, in the sense, like they have forms that they fill out before they come in. Like my work is all very grounded. So it's not like I'm just floating in the sky, channeling God or angels, like I'm here on earth and everything that we're doing is very practical. And I believe that our connection to our intuition and to God, to a higher self, is all very practical. Like we're here to do work. We're here for a specific reason, not to be floating in the ethers, with peace signs all day, just like namasteing it out, So like we're literally here to do work. So it's a combination of utilizing, this information that's coming through along with all of my experiences, my education, my wisdom, and the blending of those two ends up being how I coach. And, it's seeing, I think my gifts, if I were to kind of look at them and not have it reflected in this moment back to me, but more from just how I see it and how it moves through me, is that I have the ability to see people's blind spots and to see very, like, things that maybe are floating in the back of their mind that they don't think are important. I can see the root to what's really going on.
Do you have a good example of that you could share? Leaving out names or anything specific.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Let me think of something. Okay, well, in a recent session with a client, there's a strong desire for this individual to move forward, and to really get aligned to like the mission she's here to really have. And we've already had some ideas about that and what that's been like, because a lot of her work with me has been very much developing herself and getting really strongly reconnected to her body, to her intuition, to her connection with spirit and God. Mm-hmm. And we were in this session and it was like, I could sense, a lot of her frustration. Things weren't coming together quite as, she had hoped. And like, there's not a lot of progression happening for her. And I just kept getting this information that had a lot to do with her connection to God that was disjointed and disconnected. Like there was still some refinement and work that needed to come together. And it was funny because the form hadn't even been filled out before the session. She was trying to get a chance to do it before the session. She didn't get a chance to. So I didn't even know what we were going into the session to talk about. We had no direction in it. It was just like, okay, we got on the call. Sometimes those are the best sessions, let's work through whatever's coming up. And then when we discovered by the end of the call, it was like, God was really trying to get her attention and knocking on the door of like, you really want to move forward. Let me help you in this and invite me into this process more. Like you're connected. You're really praying. You're asking for things. You're talking to your, spirit guides, to your higher self, but you're not coming straight to me because there's still some, repair work that we need to do in our connection. And when there was all this information, it was so specific coming through for her, I knew it wasn't about mind hacking or brainstorming or mind mapping in the session of like, what do we need to do? It was more like, this is more about a beingness and a beautiful, intimate reconnection process to your relationship with God. Because when you really work through some of these pieces and you get right with God and with yourself, then of course the way will be paved. We're not meant to be here confused and lost. We're meant to have periods of time where we do go through that. But I really look at that as like the opportunity of like some inner work needs to be reconfigured, and mostly a connection to also God and to your higher self to get the clarity to start moving forward. And I've seen this happen so many times with other clients and with myself, that when this is like not working, that channeling, that connection, something's off or misaligned, everything out here is too. And I'm not able to move through because it's about aligning ourselves. And I help my clients like really align to not just their own will and their own desires, but knowing that it's also the divine will. Like it's God's will for us too. So that's like a great example of, and I hope that's helpful for you. Like that's the one that it just came up because it was so recent and happened this week. And, by the end of the session, she was like, oh my God, this like resonates so deeply for me. Like this is, there was questions that I asked her about this connection and, it was so clear to the both of us. Like I totally would not have seen the session going in that direction.
Yeah.
It did.
Do you ever have a hard time sharing what comes through for you?
Yes, there are times. But I think I'm really loving, but I like the analogy, like I'm here to challenge and support you. Mm-hmm. So when I do get guidance that is a little challenging or that I know is going to trigger a client, I'll sometimes preface this by saying, I'm receiving, information that I think is going to maybe trigger you a little bit, but I have to say it because it's a big part of our work. I'm not here to be your best friend. I'm here to love you and coach you and support you, but also stretch you. And so this is a piece. There was recently in the last 6 months, there was a client who was very challenged in her business. And I literally said, I don't think you're cut out for this. Same kind of thing that my coach at 23 said to me. I'm like, maybe you're not cut out for entrepreneurship. And it just penetrated right to the core of all of her doubts because she wasn't saying that and was dancing around. And I just said, like, maybe you're just not cut out for being an entrepreneur and you maybe just need to really become accepting of that. I don't know. And it just like went in a whirlwind. Just that statement of guidance. And I was a little worried to say it to her because I don't want to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't be doing, but it's also me being a disservice if I don't share something that I know is meant to really help them, because it did. It really had her reconfirm like her connection to her, like what she's here to do and to stop the doubt and the cycle of procrastination so she could like get shit done, So absolutely, there are times where there's things, even, in the past, there's many times when I've felt, things happening in a client's life where I'm just like, God, like, I just need to be really straight up with you. Like, I think this is what's happening. And does that sound like it might be something that's occurring? And they'll be like, yeah, you're right.
So have you ever had a hard time trusting your intuition and what comes through?
Oh, that's such a big piece. That is right there is like the core for me. That's been a major issue for just about anybody that I've been in this work with, is trusting themselves and their intuition. Mm-hmm. There were years where I didn't trust. That relationship I was in, for 2.5 years, he was unfaithful from the 6-month mark onward. I felt it, I knew it, and I didn't trust it. And I suffered so much in that 2.5-year process because I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust myself. I felt like I needed the information to be right in front of me, for it to be black and white. And the longer I prolonged the not trusting myself, my system energetically broke down to the point where I wasn't walking for the end of our relationship. My knees gave out. And if you ever look up the meaning of knees, the emotional and physical connection to that is like the inability to move forward. Oh God, yeah. The trusting piece, I think, is the biggest, I think it's the biggest gap for people to fill between having intuition and not. Because that's where all the stories come in of like not trusting themselves, feeling like in the past when they have listened to their intuition, it's disappointed them, kind of like what I went through when I was a kid, and even when I was reading my journals, there were so many times where I'd feel like, oh, I have such a strong connection to this person. I felt really, intuitively guided to continue on this path or be in this relationship. And then it ended in shambles. Like, whoa, I can't trust this part of me because it leads me to heartbreak. It leads me to disappointment. It leads me to feeling lost or suffering. The point is that the intuition, we can't have a one-way relationship to intuition. It has to be two-way. And that's going to be that your intuition is going to guide you to things that are going to help to really propel you forward. But it's also going to show you where things are not actually helping you to move forward. And it may mean letting go of things. And it may mean going through that heartbreak to wake up to certain parts of yourself and parts of your life that are just not in support of where you want to go. So it actually is, because it's easy to trust and love our intuition, right? It's just like it's easy to trust and love God when everything's going well in our life. But when we're in the unknown, when we're in uncertainty, when we're facing things that could really mean heartbreak or loss or struggle or suffering, then we kind of turn our back and we're like, well, I don't want to trust God, or I don't want to trust myself and my intuition around this because it's just leading to bad things. But it's just a mental judgment. It's like, what if all those, hard or negative or challenging scenarios and situations you went through are actually in correspondence and contribution to getting you where you want to go? Because they are. That's the beauty of it. It's just our perception of how we're viewing it. So that's what can shut people's trust down around their intuition, I find. It's like, well, I can't trust it because there's been so many bad things. And it's like, well, what if actually your intuition was warning you, but you didn't listen to it? And then bad things came out of that. I say bad things with, quotations around it. What if it actually, you needed to go through that experience and you were very drawn to it because intuitively it's connected to something else that's going to happen in the next phase or chapter of your life. Like, we just don't know. You only know until you've kind of come through the other side of whatever it is you're experiencing. But there's been so many times. I mean, I think a big part of my work has been trusting myself. When I started to do this work, I mean, it literally came out of nowhere. I never did readings, Sarah. I never cared for cards or psychic stuff. Really, I mean, I had the fascination as a kid, but like for years, I mean, I didn't think about these things. This was not something that people knew about me. So I was completely distrusting of these gifts that were coming through, that were being, that were gifted to me from God to help other people. I was bewildered and just almost afraid of it at times because I didn't know. Like, I didn't know, is this information right? And it took so many years of developing myself, like training a muscle.
I feel like it's not only confidence in yourself, or like trust in yourself, it's also the desire to know. I feel like sometimes we know on some level and then we suppress it because we just don't want to see that and what it would mean. Like what we would have to do to make that situation right, or leave that person or leave that job is just so uncomfortable that it's like, I'm just going to pretend that I don't want to hear it. And I think the more we do that, the less we hear it.
Oh, absolutely. It's I mean, another definition for intuition is the truth meter. It's like a truth meter. It's like, if we're going to just put it like so point blank, and we're not ready for the truth sometimes. It's like, I wasn't ready to leave my partner who was cheating on me. I knew the truth, but I didn't want to face it. And I think you are absolutely spot on. It's a big piece to it. We're just not ready to face the discomfort that truth can sometimes bring. And that stops us from really trusting that part of ourselves. And you're 100% right. The more we don't want to listen to the truth, the more we shut that part of ourselves down.
When I was giving birth, I don't know if you know this, but DMT is released during birth and death.
Right.
So it's the same active chemical in ayahuasca. It's the same chemical that will give you visions and things like that. So during the height of my birth experience, so the most excruciatingly painful part, I got over one contraction, and I was suddenly in this visual of this plain white field. And I don't understand how the visual correlated with the words, but it was a plain white field and this super colorful bridge from above, almost cartoon-like. It was like something you'd see in Europe with like markets and buildings and tons of people, and then like the architecture was built so that it was like water flowing under the bridge, even though you didn't see the water. So I'm looking at this visual, and the words that said, "You could be more intuitive, but you don't want to know." And then my next contraction came around, and I was like whipped right out and back into the real world. And I think there were actually more visuals. It's just the only one that was very, very strong for me. And so now during these interviews, I always think about, what don't we want to know? What is it that we're blocking so that we don't have to know?
That's so amazing. Thank you for sharing that, like, very intimate experience you had. And would you say that because of after having that vision and that realization, that this was also the very reason why you started these series of interviews for yourself as well?
I think that for me, this has been a topic that's fascinated me for a while. I had some similar experiences when I was a young girl. Like, I never felt like I was alone. I was always feeling the presence of other people, beings. I don't know. I didn't have a language for it, and I don't know that I need to define it now, but I felt like there was always more to it. And then when I was around 10, I think I got disconnected from any kind of relationship with God. I was Catholic too, and really didn't like the way that God is presented in any organized religion. Yeah. So I also spent some time as an atheist. I think mostly in college is where I was at the peak of my atheism. And then it wasn't until I started practicing yoga and learning how to teach yoga that I really became reconnected. And it was around that time that I started to feel like I couldn't ignore those things anymore. So things that I've ignored that I didn't want to know. My first long-term relationship that lasted for 9 years was not right for me. That's a big one. I knew we shouldn't have bought the house that we bought together, and I went ahead and did it anyway. And then there's a series of events that kind of freed me from that relationship and freed me from a couple of other things. And the more that I got in touch with myself, because leaving that relationship really brought me closer to me. And the more that happened, the more these intuitive hits started to come up, and the closer I got in my relationship to my spirituality at the same time. So I think you probably read the post about my friend who, when we were saying goodbye, it was in my last embrace with her that I thought I'm never going to see her again, and I didn't say anything. And a month and a half later, she took her own life. So it's those moments like that. You know, my mom was ill for 6 years. She had a stroke in 2007, and in 2012 we were working on finding her an assisted living place because she had deteriorated pretty badly. And I went home to see her, I think in April of that year, and I just looked at her and I knew she's not going to be here for very much longer. And I tried to tell my family members. Like, this time I tried to act. I was like, okay, I know this feeling. I've had it before. And I tried to tell my family members, and I think they didn't want to hear it.
Right.
And I didn't know how to communicate it very well. So they were like, I think you're just emotional, and I know this is really hard. And in July, she passed away. So there's been a series of events, like as I get closer to my own spirituality and understand it a little bit more, the more these things happen. I knew I would be pregnant. I didn't do anything about it, but I knew I would be pregnant. And I think that's part of me not wanting to admit that I was welcoming motherhood, even though it was a drastic and very challenging change in my life. You know, so it's how do we listen to How do we listen to ourselves? And then how do we get good at sharing it with other people in a way that's accepted? And how do we change the context around it? Because I think intuition isn't treated very well in our culture.
Yeah.
And it's treated as woo-woo.
Yes.
It's not understood. And I think we really need it right now because our left brain thinking is leading us down holes that are not good for us as a collective. And we need more of the right brain or unified thinking of both right and left.
Bingo.
So that's a long answer to a short question.
No, I love that. I'm so agree with you. I know it is. It's just we need to repair the relationship and the understanding of intuition, and definitely the balancing of the left and right brain hemispheres. Like we need that. I mean, we've seen how far we can go without it, and look how far we've come, and how far we need to go still. Yeah. You know, and it's really utilizing our full being. I think when I think about holistic living, holistic being, it's not just about eating, juicing and eating fresh fruits and vegetables and taking supplements and practicing yoga, right? It's like holistic living and being is encompassing all parts of ourselves. The shadow, the light shadow, our energy, the mind, body, soul, all of it, our emotions, and learning how to become this full being that we're here to be and bringing that out into the world. Because if we continue to operate solely from left brain thinking, from just the mind level, the mind and that left brain thinking is solely what's created this problem in the first place in the world. And we're not going to get ourselves out merely using the mind. It's going to be from a very holistic perspective and use of knowing who we are as human beings and discovering more about intuition. So I'm so with you. I love that story. And, and I'm sorry that there was loss, and I can understand that in my own way. It's just, we just know we're so highly perceptive and such energetic feeling beings that we know more than we actually give ourselves credit for all the time.
That's a great way to end the conversation. So I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. I feel like we have a lot more to talk about, and maybe this needs a second conversation too.
That would be great. There's always so much juiciness about this, but I would love that. And thank you for having me and welcoming me into this interview to discuss something that I'm, so passionate about, and I want way more people in the world to be tapped into. I'm all about having individuals connect to the essence of who they are. And part of that is their intuitive abilities and their spirit, and to go out into the world and be that for people. So thank you so much for allowing me to express myself and be a voice for this work as well, Sarah. You're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks again to Vanessa for speaking with me today and sharing her intuitive experiences. And thank you for listening. To find out more about Vanessa and her work, go to vanessapetronelli.com. That's Vanessa, Petronelli.com. For more information about Find Your True North podcast, go to www.intuition.today.